Hello, welcome back to the channel, Focus on Cambridge. This is Steve, your English teacher, with another video. We're aiming to help you prepare for your Cambridge exams or improve your English in general. Little bit of a different one today. We're focusing on a study method that I've mentioned in listening videos, but we're going to go into a bit more detail about how to use music to help you improve your English. Now, I imagine many people listen to music. I've heard that many humans find it peaceful, soothing, uplifting. That melodies and lyrics can resonate with our soul, with the music of the universe. People like music. What we're going to try and do is take that interest in music and use it to help our English. So we're going to listen to a song by a band called Half Man, Half Biscuit, a band that I am very, very passionate about, that I have spent years of my life listening to. There are dozens of albums, seen them live, met Nigel Blackwell, the singer, shook his hand, cried, a band that's important to me. And this is an important first step. You need to be listening to music that you can really get into, because if you're going to really dive into the lyrics, this interest will help you. So find a band that you're a bit obsessed about, I think. And as I said, my band is Half Man, Half Biscuit. I normally listen to music with a program called Music Bee, because I'm very old and I don't have any subscriptions to these things like Spotify, because I don't like paying for a monthly subscription. I paid for my music. I want to pay for it once and keep it. Anyway, you don't need to know that. It's an album by Half Man, Half Biscuit called 90 Bicidol. Bicidol is a type of indigestion drug tablet from 2011. And we're listening to RSVP. I've chosen this song because I think it tells a nice little story that we can follow. And they have great lyrics. They are a very, they're Britain's greatest poets. I didn't say it. It was said by Andy Kershaw or some DJ. This poetry is really good. It's well written. There's a lot of language to dive into there. Right, so anyway, let's get into it. That's what it sounds like. I'll put it on in the background, but I'll be talking over it so that we can appreciate the video. I would recommend go and watch the video. I'll put a link in the description, and you can go and buy their music. I recommend it. Read the lyrics, and then your first activity is, after you've read the lyrics, after you've listened to the song and enjoyed the little nods to wedding music and these kind of things, your first activity is understand the gist. What is the story of this song? Can you summarize it in 2 lines? Great skill, obviously, for listening comprehension, also reading comprehension, very important in the reading exam. But what would you say this song is about? The best summary is, it's about a man whose wife left him for another man. So he poisons them at their wedding because he's doing the catering at their wedding. And then he runs away. We know this because there's a few clues in here. So we're in a church and he is thinking back, the narrator, the author, the singer, is thinking back to a time when he could trust her, implying he can't trust her now, because John Byrne is there. John Byrne wasn't there before, everything was better. Now John Byrne is there, he's the other man. And in a cruel twist of fate, he is catering reception. He has to do the catering at their wedding. How ironic. His previous love, and now he's catering there. And there's urges that he has to resist because he could do something with the food. The problem is John Byrne is much fitter. The straightener to him holds no fears. A straightener is like a fight. He's not scared of fighting him. If the chocolate in the fountain tastes bitter, it's because it's laced with my tears. So he's been crying. That's why the chocolate is very bitter, because he's crying as he caters the wedding. Celebrations have started. The father of the bride is going to give his speech. The typical speech. It's not like I'm losing a daughter, I'm gaining a son. The typical speech. But when he's saying this, he starts to choke. Somebody dial 999. There's a problem. He's toasting the capers with what he thought was wine. He thought it was wine. It's not. What have the people in catering done? Well, by the time we cotton on, I've already landed in Wick, which is in the north of Scotland. He's escaped, he's gone. If what's in the fondue's to die for, typical wedding food, no fondue, melted cheese, but it's got nothing to do with the cheese. And if what's in the punch bowl seems lethal, normally would say an alcoholic drink is quite lethal, well, it's because it's 2/3 antifreeze, the stuff you put on your car, which is obviously poisonous. So I think it's a fun little song, this, and that's in general what it's about. But now we're going to go into a bit more detail about, okay, it's a complicated song. You understand this, you've got a good level of English, But what about my Cambridge exam? How is this helping me with my Cambridge exam specifically? Well, this is where we need to stop and start studying. We're going to go through the lyrics in detail after we have paused the music, because we don't need to listen to the next song. I mean, we could. Tommy Walsh's Ego House is a great song. Google Tommy Walsh, interesting. But one song's enough for today. So as we go into detail on this song, I'm thinking about my different parts of the English exam, of the C1 or B2 exam. What am I getting from this? Straight away, something like bleak. This is a typical part 1 word. You're describing here, probably describing the weather. A bleak day is a miserable, depressing, grey day. So words for weather, that could be on part 1. A verb like muster, meaning to convoke. Autumn has called this day. Autumn has summoned, made this day appear. Typical kind of C1 word, quite a specific vocab word. So that's part 1. You can think vocab. Then we can go on to part 2, relative clauses. Do you know how to use relative clauses? This one is a little bit more complicated because it's a place. A church is a place. So you'd think, oh, place, the church where I got married. But we can also use this as what's called a relative adverb, and then it's in which. It's the place in which I got married, the church in which I got married. So we have in the church. Now we're getting really complicated. This is the one that I don't know if it's possible for students to do. As a teacher, I think it's a useful activity for me to do, but if you can do this yourself, it would be really good. So when you see a complex sentence like this, a time when I could trust her, we've got a relative pronoun, we've got a verb that we can play with a bit, we've got like how do we use this verb? To trust someone, I trust someone, subject, object, think about how we use the verb. Can you make a part 4 question? And you can see how I have done it. I cast my mind back to when she was more trustworthy. So cast my mind back, think back, it's the same idea. When she was more trustworthy, this is the same idea as I thought back to a time, her, with the word could. They give you the word could. I hope you can see the answer, because if you're not paying much attention. It's in the lyrics. The answer is, I thought back to a time when I could trust her. She was more trustworthy, I could trust her. It fits, it makes sense. And you get 2 marks for part 4. 1 point, this is for like the sentence meaning of I could trust her. And then 1 point for knowing if she was trustworthy, then I need the verb, which is to trust. So there's always like 2 aspects to make these part 4 sentences. So that's a part 4 one. We'll keep going and see some other ones. A cruel twist of fate. A twist of fate is a great part 1 collocation. This is the expression, a twist of fate. It is not a spiral of fate or a turn of fate, for example. That sounds possible, but twist of fate is the expression, so that's going to be the right answer. Such as, how many times have you seen this in part 2? Well, a lot. If you're me, a teacher, you see it a lot. Tales such as this, tales like this one, tales, we're meaning for example. I've skipped straight to reception because I wanted to find a part 3, receive, reception, but also I found myself. Reflexive ones, there's more than I'm including. If you really go into the lyrics, you'll find so much from a Cambridge exam. But I found myself was a part 2 word, very common to have a reflexive question. But part 3 as well, reception, receive, reception. And straighten, I've seen this on the exam. Straightener, probably not, because this is very specific, like I guess northern, half man, half biscuit from Liverpool, by the way. By far the best band to ever come out of Liverpool. So I guess this is like a northern expression, a straightener for a fight. It's not going to be on a Cambridge exam. But straighten could be. They are straightening the road. I've seen that on a Cambridge exam. So straightener for part 3. And I wanted to do another part 4, of course. Thinking of these complex sentences, like here the point is causation, isn't it? The chocolate is bitter because I cried in it. The bitterness is due to the fact that I cried in it, with because, due to the fact, because. Typical Cambridge transformations. If the chocolate in the fountain tastes bitter, it is because it has been laced with my tears. That is a very, very difficult one because laced with my tears is very poetic. It wouldn't be on a Cambridge exam for C1. But, you can understand it because you've understood the lyrics. And you can see, as I said, causation due to the fact that because, and then we've made it passive. I cried in the fountain. The fountain is laced with my tears. The chocolate is laced with my tears. It's like a passive construction for the other mark. To finish the song then, another part 3, a typical part 3 that I've seen a lot, celebrity to celebrations, celebrities. And it's a plural, isn't it? If you watch my video on part 3, you will see what I always say. Make sure you look for plurals on part 3 because they're very, very common. Were well underway. Were, this must be plural because it's third person plural. It's not like I'm losing a daughter. This kind of comparative structure, it's as if I was. This is really common on part 2, as if or like. Violently, another part 3. What did I just say? Watch my video. Plurals. Adverbs. That's what you'll find on part 3. Violence. He was violently starting to choke. How was he starting? Violently. Adverb. Toast. To toast something. That's a nice typical C1 expression for part 1 because you need to know a specific word in a specific context. To toast is to say, here's to the capers. Those weird little things you have in salads that are a bit bitter. Valiantly could be on part 3, a little bit tricky, so I haven't done all of them. What he thought was mine, part 2, relative pronoun, super common, a glass of what he thought. Remember, the relative pronoun for the thing that is what? It's a glass of the thing that he thought was wine, it's what. 10:30, before, so again, part 2, lots of time markers in part 2 with before or until. You need to understand the story of what's happening. It was 10:30 before people realised, and then by which time I'd landed in Wick. I'd flown away and landed in the north of Scotland. So by then, by 10 p.m, these time markers are really important because they are testing you if you understand what is happening in sequence, and these time markers are a way of testing that. So into the last little verse, the very funny verse about the fondue and the punch. If what's in the fondue is to die for is a great C1 expression because they can test you on 2, they can test you on 4 in part 2. They can test you on die in part 1. It's to die for, it's to, I don't know what else it would say, to suffer for, possible, but to die for is the expression. The fondue's to die for. It's got nothing to do with the cheese. You should have seen this before if you've practiced a lot of part 4, because I've seen it on different part 4 exams. Typical part 4 expression. If the fondue is delicious, it's unrelated to the cheese. It's because he's put something in it that shouldn't be there. So if what's in the fondue is to die for, with do, well, it's unrelated. It has nothing to do, or it has got nothing to do with the cheese. Both are possible. I think that's about it for all of the expressions that I found there. I did this fairly quickly, I didn't want to make it super complicated because you're still enjoying music, I hope. You're not going to spend hours and hours analysing it to death. But you can see in a little 3-minute song, we've got at least 3 typical C1 questions or grammar points for the 4 parts of English. And this is you can see that's the total song, is 6 little verses. So there's a lot on there. Key takeaways for learning via music then, I would say, number 1, it must be an artist you can get quite obsessed with. I had a year at university where I only listened to Half Man Half Biscuit. Every day listening to them, all day when I was walking, when I was cleaning, when I was doing stuff, just all day. It needs to be an artist you're a bit obsessed with. Many of us have those. Well, take that obsession and start learning English with it. Have a conscious C1 mindset. So you're thinking, okay, vocabulary for part 1, this word, similar to this word, like we saw in this one. Are there different words to describe bad weather? Is bleak, is depressing, is grey, is, vocab groups. Typical part 2 prepositions, part 4 expressions, part 3 transformations. For all the parts of the exam, you get to know them, you can really learn a lot on them. And if you can, obviously keep these in your notes. Like I've said in all my videos, you should have notes for part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And music, lyrics are a great place to find expressions that you can then put in part 1, 2, 3, or 4, as well as past exams, obviously. And then look at your notes again, study them. If possible, work with a friend. All of these questions that I've made, these part 4 questions, for example, if you had a friend who was also a fan of Half Man Half Biscuit, send it to them and say, can you do this question? And they will send you some, and then you're really studying. Right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.